PHP comes with a long list of functions which allow us to work with arrays. If we go to php.net and in a search bar let's type array and hit enter, you'll get to see the page which basically has all these functions displayed here. The one we've been working with so far was the one that creates an array. You can see array. If we click on this one, you'll see that you can obviously read a little bit more about what we've been going through in a previous video. Next thing we are going to be looking at is the function called array shift. So we can either search here for this specific function, I'll type it in a search bar. So array underscore shift. If we now click on this one, and there we go. It shifts an element of the beginning of the array. What does it mean? It basically takes the first element from the array, shortens the array by this element, and resets the keys. It also returns this first item that we're actually retrieving from this array. So let's quickly have a look at this in our editor. I'm going to keep this array which we've created in the previous video, but I'm just going to my ID allows collapsing of the code, so I don't have to see it all. As you can see, if I mouse over these three dots here, it shows me what's inside of this array, but I don't necessarily have to look at it all the time. So I'm just going to remove this last line, which was actually retrieving one of the items from the array. And what I'm going to start with is, first of all, I'm going to create the first item variable, and I'm going to use this array underscore shift and then pass languages array to it. Now, if we go back to the browser, you'll see that we are actually passing this specific array as a reference. We'll find out about passing variables or arrays as reference to the functions later on when we're actually discussing functions. But what you need to understand about referencing, this and symbol here before this variable name, is that when we are actually doing this way, whatever happens to this array inside of this specific function will affect the array which we are actually passing in. And this is why it shortens actually the array rather than just returning the value without affecting it at all. So if we go back to the editor, let's quickly have a look at what's going to happen. First of all, what I'm going to do is echo pre. We're going to return print r, and we're going to pass these languages in. Then echo closing pre-tag, so that we know what's inside of this array before we actually call this array shift. Then I'm just going to copy all this. Echo first. Actually, we can't echo because it's an array, obviously. So because the returned item will be an array as well. So what we need to do is, again, print, but rather than languages, this time I'm going to have first item. And then I'm just going to echo now array should be shorter. Let's just keep it like this, and then we are going to again return this languages array. We'll see what's going to happen. Let's go back to the browser and to our course, phpcourse.dev. Let's refresh the page, and there we go. So this is the first time that we actually return in the array, which has en, fr, de, es, and pl. Then we are returning this first item array, basically, which we've shifted of the beginning of this languages array. Now, once we did this, have a look at that. We no longer have en in this array. We only have 4 items rather than 5 as we had originally. So if we scroll down, we have this first item associated with this new variable, but our array is now shorter by 1 item. As you can see, everything has shifted up. Now, when I said that the array after shifting resets the indexes, that only applies to the automatic indexes, basically, which when you don't specify indexes strictly, as we did, obviously we're using strings here. Otherwise, if there were no indexes, if we go back to the editor, and I'm just going to copy this languages array. Obviously, I'm copying everything, even though it's collapsed. If you can see, I'm just obviously revealing everything, and I'm just copying this, and I'm going to copy this underneath. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the indexes, the strict indexes that we've actually specified here. If I'm just going to remove these, and just have arrays straight under the main array. And I don't have to worry about this first one because this second one, it basically overrides the previous one, obviously. If we now go back to the browser, if we refresh the page, you can see now, if I go up to the top, the index 0 is associated with the English section, then 1 is with the French, 2 with German. But if we scroll down, once we shifted this first item of the array, now at index 0 we have French. This is where the index actually gets to be reset, because we've removed the first item basically by retrieving it and associating this with a new variable, and our array just values have been shifted up, and obviously the index has been reset back to starting from 0, and now we have only 4 items. Obviously last item, because the index goes from 0, is going to have an index of 3. Now even if I strictly define numerical indexes for these arrays, let's say I'm going to start from 2. So I'm going to make it 2 for the first one, 3 for the next one, say 4 for the following one, and then let's make it, let's just jump one number and make it 6. And the last item will be, say, 8. So if we now save it and preview it in the browser, if I refresh it, if I scroll up to the top, you can see starting with our array, before we actually shifted any items, we have all these items with the indexes we specified earlier. Then we do the shift using array shift function. But after this, as you can see, all indexes have been reset again from 0 to the last item, which is 3. So if you want your keys to remain the same after the use of array shift, make sure that they are strings basically rather than numerical ones. Now let's go back to the php.net and let's search for another function. This time we are looking for array underscore pop. So if we select this one, there we go. What does this function do? It pops the element of the end of array, and it does it exactly same way as array shift. The only difference is it does it from the end of the array rather than from the beginning. As you can see, you can see this and symbol here before the array name, indicating that it's going to use this array as a reference, meaning whatever happens inside of this array pop will affect the actual array outside of this function. So let's go back to the editor, and I'm going to remove this second array because we don't need it now. You know how it works with the indexes now, so we can use the original one which we've got here with this en, fr, and so on, string indexes basically. So what we're going to do now, let's use the same code, just rename basically this array shift to array pop. And we still use the same array languages. Rather than first item, now let's call the variable a last item. And if I now just pass it to this print r function, and if we go and preview everything in the browser, if I now refresh this page, there we go. So we start in our original array as it was before. Obviously we have 5 items here. Then we do array pop, which is the last item in the array. As you can see, last item in this array is PL for Polish, and this is our entire last item block basically displayed here. And then we have our array starting with en and so on, going to Spanish language, and obviously we don't see the Polish now there now, because obviously our array has been shortened by 1 from the end, basically using this array pop function. A few things before we finish this lesson. Have a look at the output of this array basically, which has been popped from our original array. As you can see, it does not contain a key. The key is completely ignored. It returns the value rather than key and a value. So whenever you are using array shift or array pop, you are going to lose the key associated with the value which we are actually returning. So you can see this is just our value, and that's what we get here. And now if we get back to the editor, what I'm going to do is now, rather than printing this last item, let's remove this block and let's echo specific item from this array, and let's go for language. There we go. Because it's an array, obviously we can call this language string value, because the language associated item is of a string type. So if we go back to to our browser, refresh it, you can see now Polish, and then obviously the second line, which we've got this now array, should be shorter. Let's just remove this line for now, because that is not necessary, and we can actually remove these prints from here as well. So all we are interested in is this last item in the array. If we go back to the browser, refresh it, there we go. So we get language. Then we also know that obviously we can retrieve the currency. So currency, but as you may remember, currency, the value associated with the currency is an array. So let's get the index of this currency array, which might be either old or new. So let's go for the old currency, and this specific value, this specific key stores the string. If you can see here, we've got, if I just expand this all, you can see we've got currency, which is an array, and then we have new, which is a string, or old, which is also a string, is always associated with a string. So there we go. If we now save it, let's see what's the old currency in Poland, and it was zloty. So if we go back to the editor, and if we do the same with array shift, just using the previous function we've been working with, let's check what this is going to give us. If we refresh now, pound sterling, we remember obviously pound sterling is the British currency, obviously language English, and then pound sterling for new and old in United Kingdom. So obviously that gave us the first item. It shifted the first value from this languages array, and then gave us basically the currency array with new and old as pound sterling. That's why we are now getting this specific currency. Obviously the same is gonna be for the language. We should now get English. So if we now save it and go back to the browser, refresh, and there we go. So that's how array shift and pop works in PHP.